He came to mop floors. She came to rule an empire. Neither expected the janitor to be the one who cleaned up their hearts. When widowed single father Daniel Hart takes a quiet janitorial job in one of the city's most ruthless financial towers, all he wants is a steady paycheck to keep his daughter safe and fed. He expects to be invisible, disposable, forgotten. But a chance encounter with Vivian Coleman, the cold and calculating CEO of Coleman Financial, sets off an unexpected chain of moments, small, human, and quietly revolutionary. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones, and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The city shimmered under a blanket of tired neon and artificial stars. A cool wind tunneled between skyscrapers, whistling through concrete canyons, kicking up yesterday's newspapers and tomorrow's anxieties. In the shadow of the towering Coleman Financial Tower, a man stepped out of a creaking city bus, his boots hitting the sidewalk with a muted thud. Daniel Hart was tall, but there was a weight to him, not physical but emotional. His shoulders slumped just a little, his eyes held more night than light. His clothes were clean but worn, pressed carefully, not out of vanity but out of dignity. He adjusted the strap of a faded duffel bag and stared up at the glittering skyscraper that loomed over him like a promise and a threat. He muttered under his breath, "Just floors, Daniel. Just keep 'em clean." Inside, the Coleman Financial Tower was antiseptic in its luxury. The kind of place where silence wasn't just expected, it was designed. Motion sensors triggered the automatic glass doors, welcoming him with a soft hiss and a mechanical whisper of "security check approved." The lights inside were bright, harsh, casting everything in high definition, including his insecurities. The lobby smelled like lemon-scented disinfectant and polished marble. Every surface gleamed, every line was sharp. Towering marble columns flanked a reception desk that sat beneath a massive silver SF logo, like some corporate deity watching over its temple. A woman sat behind the desk, tapping away at her tablet. She didn't look up. "Janitorial team uses the service elevator," she said, her voice monotone, practiced. She pointed without looking. Daniel nodded politely. "Thank you," he said, though she never heard it. He made his way down the hallway toward the elevator, boots echoing against the pristine floor. Each step felt like he was trespassing on someone else's reality. He wasn't supposed to be here. He was a mechanic by trade, a builder by instinct. But life had a way of rerouting dreams through alleyways and back doors. The elevator rattled slightly as it climbed. He pulled out a small photo from his shirt pocket. Emma, 7 years old, all messy curls and dimpled cheeks. She was grinning with 2 missing teeth, hugging a plush dinosaur they'd rescued from a thrift shop. He kissed the corner of the photo. "For you, kiddo." When the elevator doors opened on the maintenance level, Daniel found his assigned locker. Inside was a gray janitor's shirt with his name tag stitched in blue thread. He changed, clipped on his badge, and checked the cleaning roster. Floors 17, 21, and 34 tonight. By 9 p.m., he had already restocked the supply cart and finished vacuuming 2 floors. It was monotonous work, but there was peace in the repetition. Push. Sweep. Wipe. Rinse. The floors didn't judge. They didn't whisper behind your back or wonder how you fell from being a family man with a garage business to scrubbing office toilets. On the 34th floor, everything changed. The air was colder, quieter, heavy with importance. Frosted glass conference rooms flanked sleek workstations. Every corner was curated, every desk minimalistic. This was where the executives lived, the elite. He worked slowly, meticulously. He emptied bins with care, straightened chairs that were slightly askew, and wiped down counters like they were altars. As he moved past a tall window, he caught a glimpse of the city below, a sea of headlights and ambition. Somewhere out there, Emma was asleep in their small apartment, clutching a hot water bottle for warmth and dreaming of better things. Daniel bent to pick up a stray paperclip and whispered, "We'll get there, baby girl." one mop stroke at a time. A voice crackled through his earpiece. "Floor supervisor checking in, Daniel. You good?" He clicked his badge. "Yeah, just cleaning dreams off the floor." The supervisor chuckled. "All right, poet janitor. Keep it up." Daniel smiled faintly. He didn't mind being invisible. It gave him room to observe, to think. But a part of him, just a sliver, longed to be seen. Not as the janitor, but as a man who was trying. Fighting. Not quitting. He pushed the cart down the hall, whistling an old folk tune under his breath. The silence of the office swallowed the sound, but it was enough to keep the rhythm of hope alive. And as he turned toward the conference room at the end of the hall, a flicker of light behind frosted glass caught his attention. A silhouette. Hunched. Still. But that moment, that shadow, would belong to tomorrow. Tonight was about surviving. And Daniel Hart was damn good at surviving. The silence of the 34th floor wasn't just absence of sound. It was engineered, thick, expensive silence. A kind of hush that swallowed echoes before they were born. Even Daniel's sturdy boots, worn smooth with miles of labor, barely made a sound on the polished stone floor. He moved with quiet efficiency, gliding between cubicles like a ghost with a spray bottle. In another life, Daniel might have been something else, a teacher, a mechanic, even a poet. But tonight, he was a janitor with a daughter to keep warm and fed, and that was enough. As he pushed his cart past the C-Wing conference rooms, he noticed a small thing out of place, a warm yellow glow bleeding through the frosted glass door of conference room C. Most lights here were set to motion sensors. At this hour, they should have gone dark unless someone was inside. Daniel paused. It wasn't his business. That was rule 1. Don't interfere. Don't ask questions. Invisible meant safe. He moved forward. And then he heard it. A sound too human to ignore. Soft, muffled sobs, quickly stifled but unmistakable. Someone was crying. Not the kind of weepy sniffle people faked for sympathy, but the guttural, trying not to break kind. It reached something raw in Daniel's chest. His instinct screamed, "Walk away." Instead, he leaned forward and glanced inside through the frosted pane. The outline was blurred but clear enough. A young man hunched over the long glass table, shoulders shaking, hands covering his face. Papers were scattered like a storm had hit, and a shattered coffee mug lay in a spill of brown and ceramic shards at the far end. Daniel hesitated, fingers grazing the handle of his mop. Every sensible part of him said to keep going. But then a voice echoed from memory. Emma, one evening, sitting on the edge of her bed with oversized pajamas and wide, earnest eyes. "Daddy, you said if someone's crying, it means they ran out of strong for a minute. Doesn't mean they're weak, right?" He had told her that. He couldn't ignore it now. Daniel tapped gently on the door, a quiet rap-rap, meant more to announce than intrude. The sobbing stopped instantly, followed by a scramble of paper and the rustle of sleeves. Daniel opened the door just enough to poke his head through. "Hey, sorry to bother you. Just saw the light. Thought maybe you needed something." The young man turned toward him. Early 20s, sandy hair disheveled, eyes red and watery, tie askew like it was strangling him. He blinked at Daniel, confused by his uniform. Probably expecting security, not someone with a mop. I'm fine," the young man said quickly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "Really? Just spilled some coffee. I'll clean it." Daniel stepped in and gently shut the door behind him. "I got it," he said, voice soft. "It's my job. And anyway, no law against spilling tears with the coffee." That broke something. The young man's lips trembled, and his eyes welled again. I messed up a report," he said. "Big one. Vivian, Miss Coleman, she tore it apart in front of the partners. I was supposed to be her intern. Her shadow. I didn't even get the font size right." He tried to laugh, but it came out choked. Daniel knelt down with a towel and started blotting the mess. He spoke without looking up. "You know how many times I've had to fix a busted engine at 3 a.m. with duct tape and a flashlight? Then the next guy comes in, revs it once, and tells me I did it all wrong." The young man sniffed. "What did you do?" I told him to take the duct tape off and fix it himself. He looked up, but I didn't have that choice. I didn't have a say. She humiliated me in front of everyone. Daniel nodded. Yeah, some people forget we're all human before we're our job title. There was a pause. I'm Richard, the young man said eventually, clearing his throat. I'm an intern. Or was. I might be fired tomorrow. Daniel offered a hand, calloused and steady. Daniel. Janitor. Richard took it, his grip weak but grateful. Daniel stood, deposited the towel in a disposal bag, and pointed to the papers. Pick those up. Not for her. For you. Richard blinked. What difference will it make? Daniel gave a small smile. Picking up after a mess is what separates people who fail from people who recover. He didn't wait for a reply. Just nodded once and left. As the door clicked shut behind him, Richard sat in silence. For the first time that night, he didn't feel like collapsing. And in the hallway, Daniel moved on with his cart, already disappearing back into the quiet glow of the service corridor, unaware that his words were the first stone in a path neither man could yet see. Vivian Coleman believed in control. Her days were measured in 5-minute increments, her wardrobe in monochrome tones, and her staff by metrics and efficiency charts. To the board of Coleman Financial, she was nothing short of a phenom. The woman who took a legacy firm built on gray-haired pedigree and turned it into a ruthlessly lean empire. She didn't run the company. She commanded it. Tonight, however, something was off. Vivian stood at the edge of her corner office on the 40th floor, sipping lukewarm green tea from a bone-white ceramic mug. Below her, the city sprawled like circuitry, blinking and buzzing. Her heels were off, resting neatly beneath the minimalist glass desk. Even barefoot, she stood ramrod straight. She had reviewed the quarterly projections 3 times already. She had signed off on 2 acquisitions before dinner. She had delivered a takedown of a misfiled investor pitch that had left one intern nearly in tears. But it wasn't the numbers that lingered in her mind. It was the quiet, or rather, the sense that something in the building was shifting. She had noticed it first 3 nights ago when she'd come in late and found someone had reorganized the executive lounge. Not carelessly, but thoughtfully. Mugs alphabetized by type. Tea bags sorted by region. Even the lemon wedges were sliced thinly and angled the same direction. Odd. Precise. And certainly not protocol. She hadn't mentioned it. Just noted it in that mental ledger of things most people never saw. Tonight, it was the air on the 34th floor, fresher somehow. The chairs no longer squeaked. The trash bins didn't smell of stale coffee. Even the scent of some industrial cleaner was slightly different. Less sterile. Less lonely. She noticed things like that. Vivian crossed the room and opened a secure staff database on her tablet. She scrolled to janitorial assignments. The name Daniel Hart appeared beside floors 17, 21, and 34. New. No photo. She tapped the name twice. Nothing more than basic information. Previous experience, auto repair. Emergency contact, Emma Hart. Emma, she said aloud, testing the name in her mouth like a rare spice. Vivian rarely paid attention to cleaning staff. Not out of malice. She simply assumed the building would be maintained. That was the point of money and systems. They handled things beneath notice. But now this janitor was interesting. She caught herself. No, not interesting. Disruptive. Vivian wasn't cold by nature, though many believed it. The nickname Ice Queen had stuck years ago, gifted to her by a gossip blog after she dismantled a scandal-ridden division in under 72 hours without blinking. She hadn't laughed at the name, but she hadn't denied it either. Cold kept you respected. Cold got you listened to in rooms where women were still explained to. But cold also made her apartment empty at night. Cold meant her reflection was often the only company in a building full of people who feared her. She tapped her mug thoughtfully. Her mother had once said, "Power makes you unapproachable. Keep your loneliness out of the press." She had. Always had. A chime pinged at her desk. A note from Calvin read, Senior VP of Strategy. Tomorrow's partner pitch. Don't forget to remind the intern not to breathe during it. He's a nervous wreck. Vivian's eyes narrowed. She remembered the intern, Richard, shy, too eager, prone to apologies. Useless under pressure. He hadn't cried in the meeting, but his hands had shaken. He had stumbled through his portion like a man chased by shadows. She'd cut him off with precision and corrected his numbers publicly. Was that the night? She minimized the email. For some reason, she now pictured Richard, hunched and weeping behind frosted glass, watched silently by. She paused. That janitor. Daniel Hart. She'd caught the faintest glimpse in passing. A tall figure, mid-40s maybe, steady hands and quiet eyes, guiding a mop like it was a violin. He didn't flinch when he saw her. Most people did. He looked at her. Not as the CEO. Just looked. Vivian shut her tablet. Enough. This was absurd. She didn't have time for poetic janitors or crying interns or unexplained freshness on the 34th floor. She had meetings, deadlines, and a future to carve from the bones of lesser companies. And yet, her eyes lingered on the service elevator visible from her office. When it opened a few minutes later and she saw him emerge, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, shirt tucked, hair slightly damp from effort, Vivian didn't look away. Daniel Hart didn't see her. Or if he did, he didn't care. He simply walked down the hallway, collected, unnoticed, and disappeared around the corner like a man who didn't need the world to applaud. Vivian set her tea down and stood perfectly still. Somewhere in the vast architecture of her mind, a new equation began forming. And for the first time in months, she didn't know the outcome. Saturday nights in the city were for rooftop parties, overpriced cocktails, and chasing promotions in loud, desperate bars. But for Daniel Hart, Saturday night meant silence, and maybe, if luck held, a chance to bring Emma to work with him. She loved coming to Coleman Tower. Not for the glamour of its architecture or the glass elevators that whooshed past glowing floors. No, she liked the vending machine on the 21st floor, the way the carpet smelled like a brand new pencil, and the polished hallways where her footsteps echoed like a parade. Daniel checked her in at the service entrance. Emma wore her cleaning sidekick vest, an old reflective safety vest he'd resized and decorated with glitter glue and patches. On her back she had written, "Official Mop Co-Captain" in shaky block letters. 3 hours. Then homework, promise, Daniel said, crouching to zip up her jacket. You sure you want to be stuck here with boring old me? I like boring old you, she said, ruffling his hair. You're my dad, and this place needs sparkle. He couldn't argue with that. They rode the freight elevator together, Emma swinging her legs from a supply cart as Daniel checked his clipboard. The higher the floor, the quieter the night became. By the time they reached floor 34, it was a hush of fluorescent lights and soft hums from sleeping machines. Emma scampered between cubicles, pretending the printer was a spaceship, then settled into an unused conference room with a handful of dry erase markers and a juice box. She drew while Daniel emptied trash bins and polished glass. 3 hours later, she was curled in a spinning chair, chin resting on her arms as she admired her work, a drawing on the corner of a whiteboard. Stick figures. One big, one small. The tall one had a mop in one hand and a heart in the other. The small one had a huge smile. Above them, in giant looping letters, she had written, "My daddy is a hero." When Daniel found her, he stared at it for a long moment. "You're not supposed to draw on office things, Lil," he said gently. "But it's a whiteboard," she argued. "Whiteboards are for ideas. And that's my idea." He laughed. "Can't argue with that." He snapped a picture of the drawing, kissed her forehead, and gently wiped it clean. Almost. He left the words behind. The drawing faded, but the phrase lingered. "My daddy is a hero." Daniel didn't know it, but he'd forgotten one small swipe in the bottom corner. A tiny doodle, a red heart with a smiling face. Emma's trademark. Monday morning. Vivian Coleman never used conference room C. She preferred the more secure briefing rooms upstairs, or her own private executive suite. But this morning, an emergency rescheduling had pushed a partner call to C. She entered with her usual stride, espresso in one hand, tablet in the other. She stopped short halfway into the room. There, in the lower corner of the whiteboard, nearly erased, barely noticeable, was a faint child's scrawl. "My daddy is a hero." Vivian blinked. She approached, inspecting it closely. The pen had almost vanished, but the intent remained. Joyful. Proud. Unfiltered. There was a small red heart in the corner. A child's work, without question. She sat down at the table, but the words hovered in her mind, louder than her morning briefings. She tried to focus on budget line items and quarterly growth. She couldn't. Her eyes kept drifting back to that corner. Who would bring their child here? Who would leave something so personal in a place so impersonal? Daniel Hart. She didn't know him, but she suddenly wanted to. Later that day, as the boardroom emptied, Vivian stayed behind. She turned off her tablet, walked to the window. The skyline glittered, indifferent. She imagined a little girl, sitting at the head of the table like it was a throne, drawing pictures of her father. A man mopping a floor in silence while holding her world together. No title. No corner office. No portfolio of stocks or letters after his name. Just a dad. And somehow, in that moment, Vivian Coleman, the ice queen of Coleman Financial, felt her armor bend just slightly. Maybe, just maybe, not all heroes wear suits. The sound of a ceramic mug shattering was sharp enough to echo through the executive lounge like a gunshot. It happened late, just past 11 p.m., and Daniel was alone, finishing up a hallway outside the 40th floor break room. He paused, mop handle resting against his shoulder. There was only one person who used that lounge at this hour. Vivian Coleman. Daniel hesitated. He wasn't required to clean personal spaces until employees left. But the sound of breaking china wasn't just mess, it was a moment. A slip. He gave the door a knock, not too hard, just enough to announce presence. "Everything all right in there?" A pause. Then her voice, composed, clipped. "Yes. Just dropped something. I'll clean it." Daniel opened the door anyway. Vivian stood barefoot again in the lounge, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly undone, her spine still ruler straight. At her feet, the remains of a porcelain mug, shattered across polished tile like bones after a battle. She looked down at the mess, then at Daniel, a flicker of something unguarded crossing her face. "You shouldn't be in here," she said. "You shouldn't have to clean this alone," he replied. He didn't wait for permission, just knelt quietly and began picking up the larger shards, sweeping them into a dustpan. His movements were methodical, deliberate, respectful, like the broken pieces were sacred. Vivian watched him. "You know," she said slowly, "that was my father's mug." Daniel glanced up. "The one who started the company?" "No, the one who abandoned it. And me." Her tone was matter of fact, but her eyes betrayed her. They were glassy with a sheen that no corporate training could hide. "I kept it to remind myself what not to become," she added. Daniel set the dustpan aside and sat on the edge of the lounge's low window ledge. He didn't speak right away. He simply offered her presence, not pressure. Eventually, he said, "You ever fix something that doesn't want to be fixed?" Vivian raised an eyebrow. "I run a company, Mr. Hart. That's all I do." "Not what I mean," he replied, leaning forward. "I mean something cracked from the inside. You keep patching it, pretending it holds. But it leaks. Every damn time." Vivian sat down slowly across from him. Her voice dropped to a murmur. "I was 10 when he left. Said business took priority. Mom made excuses for him, said he was under pressure. But even at 10, I knew what abandonment felt like." Daniel nodded, folding his hands in front of him. "I buried my wife 4 years ago," he said softly. "She passed away on a Wednesday. By Saturday, I was back under a truck, fixing the suspension of a delivery van that didn't deserve to live. Not because I wanted to, because Emma needed breakfast." Their eyes met. For the first time, Vivian saw the weight behind his calm. The same weight she carried, hidden beneath tailored suits and silver heels. Daniel gestured to the broken mug on the floor. "Some things don't need fixing. Just letting go." She exhaled, long and slow. "I don't know how to do that," she admitted. "Start small," he said. "Start with not pretending you're okay when you're not." Silence settled between them. But it wasn't the cold silence of empty meetings or sterile lobbies. It was the silence of shared sorrow. The kind that binds. Vivian glanced at the counter. 2 new mugs stood unused on the shelf. She took one and poured a fresh cup of tea, then offered it to him. "No lemon, no sugar," she said. "That okay." Daniel took it. "I'm not picky." They sipped in silence. Outside, the city kept pulsing. Inside, 2 broken people drank warm tea beside the remains of shattered porcelain. For once, neither of them tried to sweep their pain away. They just let it sit there, quietly acknowledged. The tension in Coleman Financial Tower that Monday morning wasn't visible, but it was palpable, like the charge in the air before a lightning strike. Daniel sensed it the moment he clocked in. People looked at him differently. Not cruelly. Not kindly either. Just carefully. Like someone might look at a man walking with a ticking briefcase. He continued his shift as normal, pushing the cart, polishing glass, emptying trash. But beneath his calm exterior, the alarm bells had started. And then at 2:17 p.m. it came. A voice over the intercom. A request to report to the building's security office. Daniel hadn't been summoned there once in 6 weeks of working nights. He didn't ask questions. Inside the security office, the room was gray and windowless, lit by overhead fluorescents that made everyone look vaguely guilty. Behind the desk sat Calvin Red, Senior Vice President of Strategy, flanked by security lead Janine Holt. Calvin smiled. That kind of smile people wore when they believed they had you cornered. "Mr. Hart," he began, "thank you for coming in. We've encountered an issue." Janine pulled up security footage on a monitor. Grainy, time-stamped. Daniel. Alone. Walking into a storage room on the 21st floor. Nothing unusual. Until Calvin leaned forward and froze the video. 2 hours later, he said, an internal audit discovered that several company tablets and a pair of wireless presentation remotes were missing. Only your ID badge was logged entering the room. Daniel blinked. "I cleaned that floor. That's part of my route." Calvin folded his arms. "I'm sure you do. But no other personnel accessed that room between your visit and the report." Daniel opened his mouth to respond, but closed it, because he understood what this was. Someone was framing him, and it didn't take long to guess who. Calvin Red. Always nearby when Vivian was around. Always too polite, too smiley. Always watching. And now, too eager to shove Daniel out the back door. "You think I'd risk my job to steal tablets?" Daniel asked calmly. Calvin gave an indulgent shrug. "Stranger things have happened." Janine spoke up. "We haven't made a formal report yet, but HR will be involved pending further review." Daniel nodded once. "If you're going to accuse a man, you better be damn sure you're right," he said, standing. "Because if you're wrong, you owe more than an apology." And then, without another word, he left the room. That evening, Daniel picked up Emma from school in silence. She noticed immediately. "You didn't do anything wrong," she said as they waited for the crosswalk light. "I can tell by your eyebrows." Daniel chuckled softly. "Is that so? They go all grumpy when you're mad. Not guilty." He squeezed her hand. "I might be losing my job, sweetheart." She stopped walking. "But we need it," she said. "I know." Daniel didn't cry. He hadn't cried in years. But that night, as Emma fell asleep next to him on the couch, curled up in a blanket with cartoon rockets, he sat staring at the ceiling, feeling something hollow open in his chest. He had made peace with being invisible. He had never made peace with being disrespected. Meanwhile, on floor 40, Vivian's phone buzzed with a soft ping. Internal concern about janitorial contractor Hart. See security report. Calvin. She read the attached summary. Then read it again. It didn't make sense. Daniel Hart didn't read like a thief. And Vivian Coleman didn't feel often. But her instincts, honed by a career of high-stakes decisions, screamed that this was off. She scrolled through her access logs. Daniel had been assigned to the 21st floor that night. The room in question wasn't on his cleaning list. But the footage showed him entering. No footage of him leaving with anything. The footage didn't add up. And there was something else, someone else. Richard. Vivian clicked into her calendar. The intern had been on site that night for an overnight data pull. She picked up the phone. That night, Daniel was home, packing a box quietly when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. Vivian's voice, clear and direct. Daniel, it's Vivian Coleman. Don't quit. Daniel blinked. I haven't, but I figured I might not have a choice. You do. Come in tomorrow morning. 9 a.m. Bring Emma. The line went dead before he could respond. In the basement server room of Coleman Financial, Richard stared at security logs and camera backups, a stack of energy drinks beside him and determination in his blood. He'd seen Calvin leave the storage room himself that night, 12 minutes after Daniel had entered. He knew a setup when he saw one. And this time, Richard wasn't going to stay quiet. The next morning, the city was still waking up as Daniel walked through the revolving glass doors of Coleman Financial Tower, holding Emma's hand and wearing his cleanest shirt. The last time he'd walked this lobby, he'd been invisible. Today, the receptionist looked up. Mr. Hart, she asked, uncertain. Daniel nodded. Ms. Coleman asked to see you on 40. Straight up. Emma squeezed his hand as they boarded the executive elevator. Did we win something? I think we're about to find out. Vivian Coleman stood in the center of a minimalist meeting room. She had traded her usual sharp blazer for a softer gray cardigan. Still elegant, still composed, but something about her eyes had changed. They were warmer, more human. Across from her sat Richard, visibly nervous but determined. Calvin Red was already pacing at the far end of the room. I don't understand why we're doing this in front of a janitor, Calvin scoffed when Daniel entered. Vivian turned to him slowly. You're right. That was rude of me. Calvin smirked. Because he's not just a janitor, she continued. He's a human being. One this company tried to frame. Calvin's smirk died instantly. Vivian tapped a tablet on the table. The screen blinked on, showing surveillance footage, raw and uncut. Time-stamped. Zoomed in. Footage of Calvin entering the same storage room 12 minutes after Daniel left. Footage of Calvin exiting with a company-branded duffel bag. Then Richard's voice cut in, calm and sure. I went through the uncompressed server backups from the overnight logs. This footage didn't match what was originally shown to security. Someone scrubbed the evidence. He looked directly at Calvin. Someone who knew what they were doing. And had motive. Calvin's face drained of color. You little. Vivian raised a hand. Her voice cut like a scalpel. Don't. A moment of silence hung in the room like a held breath. Then she turned to Daniel. I'm sorry, Mr. Hart. You were targeted unfairly. You deserve better. Daniel met her gaze. I didn't need special treatment. Just fairness. Vivian nodded. That's exactly what this company's been missing. She faced Calvin. You're terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you out. And I suggest you clear your cloud folders before I involve legal. Calvin sputtered, then stormed out, slamming the glass door so hard it vibrated. Vivian turned back to Daniel and Emma. Would you both join me in my office? In her office. Vivian poured 3 cups of tea. No assistants. No laptops. Just people. Emma sat quietly at the edge of the velvet couch, sipping cautiously. This is the fanciest cup I've ever touched, she whispered. Daniel smiled. I think it costs more than our couch. Vivian smiled faintly, then addressed Daniel. I want to offer you a formal position. Not janitorial. A role in operations, supervising people, morale, logistics. You have a gift most of this building lacks. Daniel blinked. You're offering me a desk? I'm offering you a seat at the table, she said. And a salary that'll cover Emma's treatments. Full benefits. Real respect. He exhaled, shoulders slumping. You sure I'm not too blue-collar for this? Vivian looked at Emma. Your daughter thinks you're a hero. I trust her judgment. Emma grinned. And there's one more thing, Vivian added. I'm starting a company foundation, something with actual impact. I want to name it after your wife. Daniel swallowed hard. For once, he didn't know what to say. Vivian leaned back in her chair. It's time this company reflected more than just profit. It should reflect people. Real ones. Daniel stood, then extended his hand. Vivian took it, this time not as CEO to subordinate, but as two people choosing something bigger than power. Something like dignity. Or maybe hope. The morning sun filtered through the tall glass windows of Coleman Financial Tower, casting long, golden beams across the polished floors Daniel used to mop in silence. Now, those same floors gleamed not from his labor, but in honor of it. The lobby was busy today, but there was a different energy in the air. Warmer. Smiles were easier. People nodded at each other in the elevator, even in suits. And when Daniel Hart stepped inside, wearing a tailored blazer instead of a gray uniform, someone actually held the door open for him. He still brought his coffee in a thermos. Old habits. The elevator dinged on the 38th floor, a newly renovated department labeled simply, People and Culture. Daniel stepped into his office. Yes, his office. It wasn't huge, but it had a view, and pictures of Emma, and a framed photo of the whiteboard drawing she had made that night. My daddy is a hero. Underneath, in a neat plaque Vivian had custom-made, were the words. Seen. Heard. Respected. Company motto, revised Q2. It was family day at Coleman Financial, a new tradition. Vivian had insisted. Emma arrived with a school project tucked under her arm and a tiny clipboard with Vice Boss written on it in marker. She ran down the halls greeting executives by name. Even the most stone-faced accountants cracked smiles as she passed. In the break room, she found Vivian pouring juice into tiny paper cups. You don't wear shoes when you're working late, Emma said matter-of-factly. Vivian smiled. True. You and Daddy are weird. Also true. Later, when Daniel found them, Emma had Vivian showing her how to write her name in cursive on a tablet stylus. It wasn't CEO stuff. It wasn't press release worthy. It was real. On stage in the main atrium, Vivian took the mic. Behind her was a banner. The Hart Initiative, supporting working parents and invisible workers. She cleared her throat. Today, we recognize that strength doesn't always come in suits. That heroes walk among us quietly, sweeping, cleaning, raising children, holding the line when no one else notices. She gestured toward Daniel, who stood beside her in disbelief. This company was built on the idea of value, but it was rebuilt on the idea of people. Daniel Hart reminded us of that. Applause erupted, genuine, not polite. Vivian turned to him and whispered with a smile, "You still smell like industrial soap." He chuckled. "I'll never fully scrub that off." She looked at him, really looked. Good. Some of us need that kind of clean. And then, in front of 300 employees, Emma climbed onto Daniel's shoulders and waved to the crowd. Vivian took a step closer, not for the cameras, not for show. Just to belong. That night, after the event, Daniel stood alone in the now quiet lobby of Coleman Tower. He looked up at the vast structure above him. Once cold, now familiar. He ran his hand along the sleek metal trim, once foreign to him. Then he turned to Emma, who skipped alongside him in her sparkly vest and glitter-covered shoes. She tugged his sleeve. "Daddy." "Yeah, baby. We live here now." He smiled. "Not in the building," he said, lifting her into his arms. "But yeah, we belong here." She nestled her head on his shoulder. And as they walked out into the city night, Vivian appeared in the glass behind them, watching with a quiet smile. The janitor had come. He had cleaned. He had stayed. But more than that, he had changed everything. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.